He risked everything when the world said it was impossible and changed humanity forever. There are stories that feel almost mythic, filled with impossible challenges and improbable victories. Stories that sound like fiction until you look closely and then realize they were lived by someone who refused to accept the ordinary limits of life. Elon Musk's story begins far from Silicon Valley boardrooms, rocket hangars, and electric car factories. It begins in Pretoria, South Africa, in a world that felt confined, rigid, and often unforgiving. Long before he became the architect of reusable rockets or a symbol of relentless innovation, Elon was simply a quiet boy with an unusual imagination. A child who didn't quite fit the world around him, and because of that, felt compelled to build his own. Growing up in the 1970s and 80s, Elon wasn't the outgoing, charismatic type. He was shy, introverted, absorbed in books, absorbed in thoughts that wandered beyond the edges of the visible world. Science fiction novels, encyclopedias, engineering diagrams, anything that expanded the mind beyond the present moment fascinated him. While other kids played outside, Elon drifted between worlds that existed only in stories. Starships crossing galaxies, civilizations built on distant planets, technologies that could transform life on Earth. These weren't just fantasies for him. They were possibilities. Ideas waiting for someone brave enough to pursue them. But childhood wasn't kind to Elon. He was bullied relentlessly, often violently, targeted not for anything he did, but for who he was. A boy who thought differently, who questioned, who didn't blend in. There was a moment, one he rarely speaks about, when the bullies pushed him down a flight of stairs and beat him so badly he had to be hospitalized. He spent weeks recovering, unable to breathe properly, unable to return to school right away. But even then, something inside him refused to break. If anything, he withdrew deeper into the world of ideas, a world where imagination held more power than cruelty. At home, life was equally complicated. His parents divorced, and the emotional environment was often tense and uncertain. Elon learned early that stability could not be counted on, and that survival sometimes meant building inner resilience when the outer world provided none. It was around this time that he discovered computers, a moment that would shape not just his future, but the technological trajectory of the modern world. At age 12, using a borrowed manual and pure curiosity, Elon taught himself programming. There were no formal lessons, no tutor, no structured guidance. Only a child sitting at a computer, learning through trial and error. And in that state of pure focus, he created his first real product, a simple video game called Blastar. It was crude by today's standards, just basic pixel graphics and limited controls. But behind it was the unmistakable logic of a mind that saw systems differently. Elon sold the game's code to a magazine for $500, a small amount financially, but an enormous signal. Even at 12, he had the ability to build something valuable from nothing. But deeper than that, the experience taught him a truth that would follow him throughout his life. If you don't have the resources, the support, or the perfect environment, you can still create, you can still begin, you can still learn your way forward. By the time he reached 17, Elon knew he could not stay in South Africa. The political climate was turbulent, the opportunities limited, and his vision too large to fit within the borders he had been born into. He also refused to serve in the South African military under apartheid, a moral decision that only strengthened his urgency to leave. So, with very little money and an oversized dream, he made one of the boldest moves of his life. He left home, alone, and emigrated to North America. He chose Canada first because it offered a pathway toward eventually reaching the United States, the country he believed was the heart of technological progress. He landed with almost nothing. He stayed with relatives he barely knew, worked odd jobs, cleaning boilers, shoveling grain, anything that paid, and pushed himself through years of uncertainty. Every step was built on one belief: the future will reward effort, even if the present doesn't. Eventually, he enrolled at Queen's University, then transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, diving deeply into physics and economics. But Elon wasn't studying to get a job. He was studying to understand how the world worked. how energy systems could change, how humanity might expand to other planets, how digital technologies could reshape society. He talked often about wanting to address what he believed were the three greatest problems facing the future of civilization: sustainable energy, space exploration, and the digital revolution. College was only the beginning. After graduating, Elon briefly started a PhD program at Stanford in applied physics. But after just 2 days, he left. The internet was exploding, the world was shifting, and he realized that innovation wasn't happening inside classrooms. It was happening in garages, in small startups, in chaotic environments where risk wasn't just accepted but necessary. So Elon did what few people with prestigious opportunities dare to do. He walked away from the safe path. He chose uncertainty over stability. He bet on possibility over predictability. And that leap led to his first major venture, Zip2. Together with his brother Kimball, Elon built Zip2 in a small rented office, sleeping on the floor, showering at the local YMCA, coding endlessly through the night. The company provided online business directories and mapping technology for newspapers. Something simple by today's standards, but revolutionary in the 1990s. The early days were brutal. They barely had money for rent, worked constantly, and faced rejection after rejection. But slowly, the product gained traction. Their first major deals brought in enough revenue to scale, and soon, Compaq acquired Zip2 for nearly $300 million. For most people, this would have been a finish line, the moment to relax, celebrate, and enjoy wealth. But for Elon, it was just a starting point. He took the money he earned and reinvested it into a new idea, one that felt too ambitious for most traditional thinkers: an online financial services platform that could change how money moved across the world. The company was called XCOM, and after mergers and evolution, it became what we know today as PayPal. He was restless, driven by a sense that technology wasn't just a business. It was a tool to reshape society. But even inside PayPal, he faced internal conflict, leadership struggles, and eventually he was pushed out as CEO. It was painful, humiliating, infuriating, another moment where someone else claimed control over something he had built. But Elon carried a philosophy he often repeats in interviews. If something is important enough, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure. He didn't say this from a place of comfort. He said it from lived experience, from moments where everything went wrong, yet he kept moving. And this philosophy pushed him toward his two most daring ventures, Tesla and SpaceX. By the early 2000s, Elon had realized that electric cars were technologically possible, but the world lacked the courage to pursue them. Car companies saw electric vehicles as impractical, unprofitable, or unnecessary. The oil industry dominated global energy, and no one believed ordinary consumers wanted EVs. Elon believed differently. He saw a world where clean energy wasn't optional. It was the only path forward. And if big automakers wouldn't take the leap, he would. So he joined a small team of engineers who were trying to build an electric sports car. This team would become Tesla. But at the same time, Elon was also dreaming bigger, farther, beyond Earth itself. Humanity, he believed, should become a multiplanetary species. It wasn't science fiction to him. It was a responsibility, a future worth building. So with his own money, nearly all of it, he founded SpaceX, a company dedicated not just to launching rockets, but to making them reusable, affordable, and revolutionary. But here is the part of Elon's story most people do not fully understand, the part that shapes his character more deeply than success ever could. Within a few short years, both companies were collapsing. Tesla was drowning in debt. SpaceX had failed 3 rocket launches in a row. The 4th launch would determine whether the entire company survived or died. Elon was running out of time, running out of money, running out of options. There was a moment, perhaps the most defining of his life, when he thought he would lose everything. Not just wealth, but purpose. The thing he had devoted himself to, the dreams he believed could change the world. It was the darkest period of his career, and the moment where his resilience revealed itself fully. Instead of stepping back, instead of playing it safe, instead of accepting defeat, Elon doubled down. He poured every remaining dollar he had into keeping both companies alive. It was an all-or-nothing decision that most experts considered reckless, almost absurd. But Elon had never been guided by what others believed was realistic. He was guided by what he felt was necessary. And that next rocket launch, the fourth SpaceX attempt, finally succeeded. That single moment saved the company. Soon after, NASA awarded SpaceX a critical contract, ensuring survival. Tesla, too, received emergency funding that kept the company afloat. The darkest chapter turned into the turning point. The hallway outside the conference room was silent. But inside Elon Musk's mind, a storm raged. The year was 2008, one of the darkest winters of his life. Newspapers predicted the death of Tesla. Analysts called SpaceX a billionaire's delusion. Friends urged him to step back before he lost everything. But if the world could have peeked inside his thoughts, they would have seen only one thing: a man still refusing to give up. Because Elon Musk wasn't betting on cars or rockets. He was betting on possibility. He was betting on humanity. He was betting on the belief that the future could be better if someone dared to build it. And he believed that someone was him. The breaking point. The winter sky above Los Angeles was dull and gray, the kind of sky that mirrored a tired soul. Elon sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of invoices, engineering reports, and late-night coffee that had long gone cold. Tesla was running out of money. Investors were backing away. SpaceX had just failed its third rocket launch. His marriage was falling apart. His personal finances were nearly gone. He wasn't just close to losing everything. He was inches from disappearance. His phone buzzed. It was a message from an investor. "We're pulling out. It's too risky." He stared at the screen for a long time. Risky. They had no idea what risky meant. Risk was walking alone as a kid in South Africa, trying to avoid bullies who hunted him like prey. Risk was leaving home at 17 with a backpack and a dream. Risk was selling his companies early because he needed capital to build things no one believed in. To him, risk wasn't danger. It was life. But even he had limits. That night, he drove home slowly, his mind foggy, exhausted. When he reached the driveway, he didn't get out of the car. He just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the empty street ahead of him. This was the closest he had ever been to breaking. And then, almost like a whisper, his own voice came back to him. "If something is important enough, you should try, even if the odds of failure are high." Those words were not a slogan. They were his survival instinct. Because Elon knew if he gave up now, it wasn't just two companies that would die. It was the future he believed the world deserved. Humanity needed sustainable energy. Humanity needed multiplanetary insurance. Humanity needed courage. And he had a choice: quit or continue. He chose the only path he ever understood. Keep going. The fourth launch. SpaceX engineers slept under desks. They showered at the factory. Some didn't go home for days, not because Elon forced them, but because they believed in this man, in this mission, in the dream of rockets returning to Earth instead of burning in distant oceans. On September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 stood on the launch pad for the fourth time. No room for mistakes, no backup rocket, no extra funding. This was it. The world watched. Elon stood quietly at the edge of the mission control room, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the screen. Failure would mean the end, bankruptcy, public humiliation, layoffs, dreams crushed. But success would rewrite history. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. One engineer whispered, please work." 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Everyone held their breath. Minutes felt like hours. Telemetry streamed across the monitors, steady, stable, safe. Then came the call. Falcon 1 has reached orbit. Silence. Then chaos. Cheers erupted. Engineers cried openly. People hugged each other so tightly their ribs hurt. And Elon, the man who had carried the weight of the world, just sat down, buried his face in his hands, and let out a long breath he had been holding for years. SpaceX was alive. Humanity was one step closer to the stars. Tesla's last breath and the Christmas miracle. But victory in space did not automatically mean victory on Earth. Tesla was still dying. Elon had used nearly all his remaining money to fund the rocket launch. Tesla employees were going unpaid. The Model S was still a prototype. And Christmas was just days away. He had no money left. But he had belief. Sometimes the only currency visionaries possess. He spent Christmas Eve on phone calls with investors, pleading, negotiating, refusing to accept the funeral of his dream. The office was nearly empty. Only a few lights glowed in the dark factory, reflecting the metallic curves of unfinished cars. Minutes before midnight, while families across the world were celebrating, Elon received a call. "All right, we're in. The funding round is approved." He closed his eyes. Tesla had survived. Not because of luck, not because of magic, but because he refused to let the idea of sustainable transport die. He believed that electric cars were not a luxury. They were the future, and the future deserved a chance. Doubt, ridicule, and hyperfocus. As Tesla began to deliver its first cars, Elon faced a new battle: ridicule. Critics mocked him on television. Analysts dismissed him as overly ambitious. Traditional automakers laughed at the idea that electric cars could compete with gasoline. SpaceX was called a toy rocket company. Reporters accused him of chasing fantasy worlds. But Elon didn't hear the noise, not because he was arrogant, but because he was focused, laser-focused. He spent nights sleeping on the factory floor. He worked side by side with engineers, adjusting machines, solving failures, redesigning components, learning from every mistake. To the world, he looked unstoppable. But inside, he was still fighting. Every mistake felt personal. Every setback felt like betrayal. Every delay felt like time slipping through his fingers. But this wasn't suffering. This was birth. Elon Musk was not simply running two companies. He was building two revolutions. Reusable rockets and the day gravity lost. SpaceX had reached orbit. But Elon's real dream was far more audacious: a rocket that could land itself, a rocket that didn't die after one launch, a rocket that could be used again and again, a rocket that would make space travel affordable for humanity. To most people, this sounded impossible. To Elon, it sounded necessary. Launch after launch, attempt after attempt, rockets crashed into the ocean or exploded on landing pads. Social media turned each failure into a joke. Elon Musk's rocket fails again. Gravity wins. SpaceX proves rockets can fall really well. But Elon didn't flinch. He looked at every explosion as data, every crash as progress, every failure as a step towards something greater. Finally, on December 21st, 2015, in front of millions watching live, Falcon 9 returned from space, turned its engines downward, steadied itself like a ballerina in the sky, and landed upright. Perfectly. History didn't just shift that day. It leaped. For the first time, gravity lost. Humanity won. Tesla's rise and the electric revolution. While SpaceX was rewriting space travel, Tesla was doing the same on Earth. Model S shocked the world. Model X challenged engineering limits. Model 3 democratized electric cars globally. Factories expanded. Gigafactories rose from empty land like metallic mountains. Charging networks spread like veins of a new technological organism. People no longer mocked Tesla. They wanted to buy one. Everything Elon had predicted was coming true. But success didn't soften him. It sharpened him, because there were bigger mountains ahead. Fame, pressure, and the invisible weight. Most people only saw Elon Musk from headlines: the world's richest man, tech visionary, controversial genius. But behind those words was a man carrying weights most people cannot imagine. The weight of thousands of employees, the weight of shareholders, the weight of dreams too big to fit inside a single lifetime. He faced lawsuits, production crises, public scrutiny, sleepless nights, burnout, and the loneliness that often comes with leadership at extreme height. But he kept going, because Musk did not chase comfort. He chased purpose, and purpose demands sacrifice. Mars, the impossible dream. Many people support renewable energy. Many dream of exploring space. But Elon Musk dared to dream further, a dream so enormous that it almost sounded like fiction. A self-sustaining city on Mars. Not a research station, not a temporary base, a city. Because he believed humanity's greatest risk was staying on a single planet. One asteroid, one pandemic, one disaster, and everything humanity ever created could vanish. Mars, to him, wasn't an escape. It was insurance for the human story, and he was willing to dedicate the rest of his life to making that story real. The lesson of Elon Musk. When you strip away the noise, the headlines, the controversies, the opinions, you're left with a man who reveals a powerful truth. Dreams do not belong to the lucky. Dreams belong to the relentless. Elon Musk was not born a billionaire. He was not handed a future. He was not shielded from pain, loss, or fear. He built everything through insane perseverance, unshakable belief, ridiculous work ethic, courage to attempt the impossible. His story teaches us, you don't need permission to dream big. You don't need applause to keep going. You don't need certainty to take the first step. You don't need perfect conditions to change your life. You just need fire. Because the future is shaped by those who refuse to stop. The man who refused to quit. Elon Musk's life is not about wealth or fame. It's about a boy who taught himself to code, a teen who escaped limitation, a young man who sold everything to fund ideas, a leader who risked everything multiple times, a visionary who built the future piece by piece, and a man who still wakes up every day asking, how can I push humanity forward? His story is a reminder that the world doesn't change when people dream normally. It changes when they dream abnormally. So if you feel your dream is too big, if people laugh at your ideas, if your path feels lonely, if your odds look impossible, remember this: if something is important enough, you should try, even if you think failure is likely. Because one attempt can change a day, one day can change a year, 1 year can change a life, and one life, your life, might just change the world.